Let's get started with Xsemble design. I'm going to open the assembler's workbench by using the run asm script. Assembler's workbench is open now. I can open a project if I already have one. However, here we are going to create a completely new application in a new project. So when I launch the new project dialog box, it asks me for the namespace under which the project is going to be created. So our advice is to create a new namespace for every project. There can be multiple projects and multiple repositories under a namespace. So you can look at a namespace as a holder for your projects and repositories to put all of them together. Let's create a new one called tasks. I'm going to give a project name as name. I could give some comment here. There are some repository dependencies. Now this X.core is a special repository that gives me all the common types like integer, string, short. Those kind of types will be available to me when I have this repository included. It is included for me by default, so let me keep it as it is. Now let's go to layers. These are the architectural layers in an application. In a typical web application, you will have two layers. One is the web layer, which is executed on the browser, and the other is the server layer, which is executed on some server. For example, when you operate Google from your browser, what you see on the browser is happening on the browser side, that is your web layer, and what is happening on the Google server side, that is the server layer. So here too we do have a web layer and a server layer, so this is a good setup for creating a web application. But if I were creating a desktop application or a mobile application, I could choose that. I'm not going to need a web layer. So fine, let's get started with this. We are going to create a web application in Jakarta technology. Let us create the pages. What I'm going to create is a task management application. The first page is going to be a task list page. In the task list page, you are going to have a list of tasks, and each task will also have a complete link so that the task can be marked completed. For creating any UI, you have to create a page instance first. Let's create one. Task list, and then I need to choose a component here. It says use existing component at base. If I already have an existing component created, then I would say yes, but if I don't have such a component, then I would say no. In this case, I don't have such a component already created. You will see that Xsemble automatically creates a virtual component for us that we will be able to use later. So great, this task list component is created. It also has a Jakarta implementation. We will not worry about what these things mean at this stage. We will need to worry about them in the development stage, which is the next step. So for now we are good to go. You also notice before closing the dialog box that it has also created some exit path for us. We will not worry about that too for now. So here is a task list page. Now, what is the other page that I need? I need a add task page. What does add task page do? It will ask me to enter the information of the task. It will ask me to enter the task name, the due date, and possibly the task priority. Let's get created here. Do I have a component? No, I don't have this component too. Let's create this. Now these are the two pages in my application. I've just created them and done. With that, I'm going to need some more functionality for actually doing work. That doing work part is accomplished by method instance. For example, when this task list is to be shown on the page, you need a method to first load that task list, say read from a database or some place. Let's create that method. It says load tasks. Again, I don't have an instance. I create it and place it between this start and task list. We are going to create the links between these later. Similarly, when I add the task, I'll need a method to save that task, isn't it? Now let's get to the next type of component. Every time you hit the server, you encounter an entry type of component. It is called entry because it's a server entry. So this is the entry page. Why do you need this component in this diagram? Because in the page, if you look at, because in a page you will see that the page starts from the server layer and it goes to the web layer, which means that the inputs are going to be on the server layer and the outputs are going to be on the web layer for the page. So when the page outputs to the web layer, from that you will need to come back to the server layer to execute the next functionality. And when you come to the server layer, that's where you need the entry point. So let us add the entry point here. Now this entry point is going to lead to add task page. So let's say add task entry. I don't have a component. For the entry point, I also need to specify some URL. I'm specifying the URI as add, and this /x is a convention that we use in our Xsemble projects. It is not mandatory to use it that way. So when I'm done, I've created the entry point now. Similarly, I'll need another entry point after this add task page, because this is also a page. So in general, you can think about, like, for every page you are going to need an entry point, at least one entry point. This is save task entry. I don't have. Let's create a URI as /x/save and save this guy. I have identified the components on the add task side. Let us now create the links between these components. Now from start, I need to create a link to load tasks. From load task, it needs to go to task list. From thereafter, it needs to go to add task entry. Via that, it will show the add task page. After that page, it is going to save the task through this entry point and the method. And then from there, you will return back to showing the task list. Let us implement that flow now. Start node has an exit path called start, and I can connect this to any one of these executive nodes. I'm going to connect it to load task so that this connection is made. From the load task, I'm going to get to the task list. So you see that the next exit path that was created for me is being used for this purpose. That comes handy here. So now this task list is also connected. From the task list, as I said, we need to go to add task entry. Now there is one thing to note. This next is designed to connect to the same layer, and now it is going to get to the web layer. Now we don't need that. We need to connect it to an entry point which goes back to the server layer. So let us change this next button to connect to another layer, and it is going to connect to another layer using HTTP GET. Once I do this, all the entry points will start appearing in this drop down. Let's choose add task entry, click OK, so that this connection is made. From the add task entry, now it is in the server layer. So it is in Jakarta E layer, connects to same layer. I'm good, and I'm going to connect to the add task. Again, I need to change next to connect to another layer. This time I'm going to use HTTP post. Well, I connected it to add task entry by mistake. So instead of that, I need to connect to save task entry. Let's correct that and click OK. From save task entry, it goes next, goes to save task, and so far I'm done. From the save task, I need to come back to show the task list. But how do I show the task list? I need to actually go to load task, because I want to also load the tasks before showing the task list. So from save tasks, let me connect the next to load tasks. This completes the control flow for me on the add task side. Now let us similarly create the control flow for the completion. Now I already have the task list. From here, one exit path is going. Can I make it more informative? Yes, of course. I can change the name to say add. So instead of next, I can start calling it add and have the same connection here. So as I know, from the page I'll need an entry point, mark complete entry. I don't have the entry point, so I click no, let Xsemble create one, and the URI I'm typing as complete. It's okay. So now I'll be able to connect this entry point from a newly created exit path. Complete goes to another layer, HTTP get is fine, mark complete entry. So once I make this connection, now you can see the task list is being connected to this mark complete entry. Similarly, from this mark complete entry point, I'll need to get to a method which will actually mark the task complete, and then from that method I'll need to go to load task. So let us create that method instance. Mark complete is the method that I am using. As we know, we are going to go to the load task from here. So let me connect load tasks from the mark complete, and finally I'll connect the entry point to this method. As you must have seen, we always use the starting node for making a link. So for example, when I need to link to this mark complete from this mark entry point, the from node, the mark complete entry point is important. That's where I make the connection. What we have completed is the complete control flow of my task application. Now this visually tells us exactly how the application is going to work. Now let us add data flow to this diagram. So far it has the control flow. All the control flow links are being shown in gray, and now we are going to add data flow. So where is the data needed? From this add task page, we need to create a task, some task data like the name, the due date, and that data will go to the save task entry. So we can create a data node for taking this information from here to here. Similarly, from the save task entry, it is going to convert that data into server side variable and then pass it on to this save task method. So let's create these variables. First is a task. I'm going to mark it transient to indicate that this task is going from one layer to another layer. Do I have a base component? Not yet. What do I want to call the component? I'm going to call it task. So it has created that base type for me. Great. Let me place it here, and now I can create an out variable from here to connect to this task transient. Similarly, I'll need to create an input variable to connect to this transient task. Let's do that. Out variable coming out from here, task to be saved. Now I already have the task type created, so I can create this, and this is a connection outside the layer because it is getting to a transient node. So let's say HTTP post. The most common parameters for HTTP posts are the request parameters and plain. So I've chosen those. Clicked OK. Clicked OK to create this task tr. I see the connection between the page and the task tr. Similarly, from this save task entry, I'll need to create a in variable. The names don't have to be the same. This is an internal name of the argument. Internal in the sense this is local to the function. So here I'm just going to call it task, and that is going to be of type task. Let it connect to its layer. If I don't use the same one, then it is going to have a mismatch in the connection. Currently there is no mismatch. Click OK and let the connection happen. Now I'll need to create a server side variable. So the task of this entry point is that it is going to convert this variable into that server side variable. Let's create a data node to create the server side variable. Task to save. The type is going to be the task type that we created. It's a virtual type so far. We haven't added any members to it yet, but that is fine. This is not transient, so then that becomes a server side variable. Task is going out, that is being connected to task to save, and I'm good with this. So now you see the connection being created. From save task, let me create an in variable. I can say task to be saved. Click OK. Connect it to task to save, and this connection is also made. Now on the left hand side, from the task list to mark completed, I'll need to pass the ID of the task. Only then this mark complete will know which task to be completed. So the same task ID needs to be passed from task list to mark completed, and then mark complete is going to create a server side variable to pass it on to this mark completed method. Let's get started with it. First comes the data node, task ID. Now here I already have the type from X.core, so I'm going to choose say long, and I need to take the implementation which is legacy Java, which is compatible with my Jakarta E layer, which is fine. This is going to be a transient node, and so by convention let me mark it as TR. Similarly, another task ID, the type will be again the same as long legacy, and let's make the connections. I need to create a variable out from the task list to pass the task ID, and this is going to be of type long. This will go to another layer using HTTP GET, and I am choosing URL parameter. That's a common way of passing variables with HTTP GET. So this part is done. Similar part for variable in. Task ID being connected to long, connects outside the layer. This is going to get the URL parameter, and then it is also going to create a server side variable. Let us create the server side variable in the click OK. Now we will also create the server side connection. So create a variable out, say task ID. It's going to be long. It's going to be connecting within the same layer because now we are already in the server layer. So it connects to task ID. I can click OK, and done with both the connection. This and from going to this particular task ID. Now from mark complete, I am going to create a variable in task ID, that is long, connect within the same layer, and that gets connected to task ID. Now in the same fashion, let us add the task list that we want the load task to pass on to task list page. For this we are going to use a built-in data type. So let's say yes and click the list. Done. Click OK. From load task create a variable out. let's say tasks, done. And from task list I can create an invariable. Superb. Let's save this, and this concludes our design activity. Within just a few minutes, we have completed the design of the task management system. Now this diagram is pretty expressive. Show it to someone so that they can understand the flow of this application. Not only that, the same diagram has created the components in the background. If you want to quickly check that, let us launch the developers workbench by using the run dev script and see these components in action. Now this task namespace is definitely there. Let's choose that, and that also has the main repository, and this repository has all these components. For now we are not going to worry about these components. We are just happy that these components are already there, and we'll be using them for adding the implementation code within the components. Thank you.